Welcome to Reality Awareness. This is Hannah, and I am being called to do a world prediction update. Haven't done one for quite some time, but over the years I have done quite a few, and I store them all on my website. There's a link in my bio called What on Earth that you can see all previous predictions and world stuff update that I've ever done before. So welcome to this update for this world prediction update that I haven't done for ages. So just to record this is the 27th of May 2024. Today I'm going to be discussing quite a few different topics, quite a few different subjects. Definitely going to revisit the 2024 black line prediction that I did in January 2020, and I predicted the collapse on the Turkey border of that big earthquake, and also the anomaly that is surfacing between Africa and Brazil that's showing up on radar and then glitching out and disappearing and coming back. And when I did the prediction back in January 2020 of Turkey collapsing, then there's like a vacuum or a vortex that happens underneath Africa, and then this earth, this new land, this continent surfaces between Africa and Brazil. And on the radar, there's been a huge anomaly appearing in that area, and I want to talk about that. I'm being guided to talk about different aspects of how Terrence Howard just literally changed the trajectory of humanity and really awakened consciousness to a whole new level. I want to talk about the different pieces and aspects to that. I want to talk about consciousness awakening. I'm going to talk about time. I'm going to talk about the energies that we're currently feeling right now and how it is literally glitching. The 2024 black line that I saw back in 2020 when I think it was April 2020, and I did like the sort of prediction of the next 10 years, and 2024 saw as a black line. Now, what does that mean? What did that mean? What does that mean? Going to delve into all these different pieces today. I'm going to touch on the twin solar system. I'm going to touch on, there was another piece I was going to touch on here. About how humans are hurting one another and how mythology is depicted as bad and evil. I'm going to talk about spiritual guides and aliens, and are we literally just an aspect of consciousness? Are they different pieces that come in? Are they us? And how we're enslaved or trapped on this dimensional earth plane, and what that actually means to the dimensions that we're connected to, and how we're actually being squeezed through a portal and coming through another aspect of reality. So a lot to speak about and share on this live stream. I'm going to just share this on Facebook, and then I'll be present with you. If you've got questions, just pop them in and I will talk about them if they're relevant, and I see them coming up here. It's a beautiful autumn day here. I thought that I would do it outside. Can feel that peace emanating through from the space that I'm sitting in. And I'd really like to start with that piece. Let's go there. Let's all take a deep breath. Let's breathe in and breathe out. Let's remind ourselves to connect in with our heart. Let's drop into a place where we remember the truth of who we are. Let's remember and realize that there is nothing that we have to do. There's nowhere that we have to be other than in this moment, right here, right now. There is so much energy purging from the collective right now, and it's quite phenomenal what's shifting and coming up. In this aspect of where we are in reality, in consciousness right now, there's no doubt that there's a huge shift happening on the planet. And in 2020, whilst it was a bad thing that happened, it stopped everyone in their tracks. And to wake up is to be stopped. To wake up to another level of consciousness, we have to stop. We become, there's a stopping of everything that we were doing, and we hit a wall, so to speak. We stop. And we hit a certain point in consciousness where that old consciousness dies and we become aware of something. Now, when we hit that wall of consciousness, that piece, that evolutionary stop, right? It's a bit like turning 15 to 16. We're no longer 15, we're turned 16, we're here. There's a leap, there's a consciousness evolutionary jump. When we hit this piece of the consciousness wall, everything stops. This is where people feel like they don't want to be here anymore because they feel like they're dying. They feel like they want to die. They feel like death. And that's because an aspect of consciousness is dying. Like an old you is literally dying. There's a consciousness shift. There's a flip. There's a switch. Something literally changes in your life and we hit this wall. Now, we have had in the last few months the eclipses over March, April, and then we've had some really strong solar storms and huge flares that have created havoc in our magnetic field, in our energy bodies, and also in the Earth's atmosphere that is no longer. Now, what's really interesting is that there's many pieces here that I'm going to jump all around the shop, and I'm going to trust that you guys are with me, because when you understand this stuff, it's all connected and it's all in these pieces here. So let's start with the prediction back in 2020 and this anomaly that is surfacing in between Africa and Brazil in the South Atlantic Ocean. Now, back in 2020, in January 2020, I did this world prediction update. Now, I'm a psychic who doesn't predict the future. I am like, because nothing is set in stone. Nothing is set in stone. And what happens to tomorrow and the next tomorrow and the next tomorrow and the next tomorrow is dependent on the choices that you make today. That you make today. And that as collective society and humanity makes today. Now, when I was guided, because I was literally in a sensory deprivation tank in a float, I'm like, everyone, just give me some space. And my guide came through really strongly and was giving me all this information about the 2020 January update that I did, the world prediction. And I was like laying there in the float. If you've ever been in one, there's no, you can't write down, you're floating in water, in salt water. And I was like, do I need to get out and like write this down? And I did. I got it out. I got out and I wrote down because I was like, I need to remember this. And it was so strong coming through. And then I went home and I did the live stream. And I'm going to read what I'd actually written back then that had come through the float. So I literally was showing this vision that, you know, along the Turkey, there is a fault line along Turkey border there, right? And we've known like that, I think earthquake happened, it was last year, wasn't it? Or was it this year? And there was a very destructive, very catalytic earthquake that happened. Now, I saw that happening in 2020. They said that there would be a big earthquake, but what they literally showed me is Turkey would literally drop underneath the ocean. So like a vacuum would happen, right? So Turkey would literally drop underneath into the ocean. The entire country of Turkey, yes, would drop underneath, and it would like be a vacuum, and there's like a vortex or a tunnel that goes under Africa, and it would then a new continent would pop out in between Africa and Brazil in the South Atlantic Ocean. And I was like, okay, and I had to like look on the map and like see what they were showing me, and I was like, okay, whatever. And so in the actual prediction that came through, you know, and I was trying to figure it out back then. I was like, if there was a volcanic piece, like, you know, I was like definitely an energetic and consciousness shift for sure. You know, and then if it does come, if that continent, if that anomaly, like the piece about that is that now in some groups and around on the internet flying around is some reels and videos where people are mapping on the radar. There's an anomaly that keeps popping up, and it's like traveling from Antarctica and coming up and creating waves. Like it's literally creating waves. So from which country? So it's between, so I saw like Turkey. So if you can imagine Turkey like dropping underneath Africa and getting sort of sucked under and then coming up. So in the South Atlantic Ocean between Africa and Brazil, like South America and Africa basically, in the South Atlantic Ocean there's a like a land mass coming up, like surfacing. That's what I was showing in 2020. And right now on the radars is the anomaly being shown, that there's like a huge, people don't know what it is. People are calling it an anomaly, but when you see it on the radar, it's coming up from when I upload this video to my What on Earth is Going On, which is my website page. I've linked it in my link in my bio, and all the previous predictions that I've ever done over the years are listed on that page. I always put the recent one up the top. When I pop that there, I'll pop a link to the radar image that I'm talking about. I'm sure there's many videos on the internet about it, but I'll pop that actual radar image there. If you haven't seen it, there's video and people are like, what is this anomaly? Keeps going, keeps coming. And the one that I was just showing on the weekend, they actually like went back and traced through over the years, and like the anomaly had kind of disappeared and now it's back after all these years, sort of thing. And it's interesting that in the prediction that I was given in January 2020, the actual like piece that it said, like I'm going to read what I actually channel wrote. It goes underneath the radar and pops off the radar and then disappears again, which is interesting given the video I saw on the weekend. That interesting, some of my internet's dropping out. Okay, Zathani's saying it was so strange, it was reversing the waves here in Cape Town. Isn't that so interesting? Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, this year is very unusual. Yeah, and so, you know, it's like, from back in 2020, it was like it goes underneath the radar, pops off the radar, and then it disappears again. And now it's back again. And again, like I said, the video on the weekend showed that when they flicked back through all the years of the radar, like back to the 1980s, like it was off the radar, on the radar, off of it. And I'm just like, oh, that's so interesting, because that's what they literally told me. This is my guide speaking to me in 2020. And so it's interesting, right? People are, you know, it's like, yeah, so it's interesting, like all these pieces that are happening, yeah? Now, I'm sharing all of these glitches, anomalies, twin solar system, energetics, and how it's affecting us as humans on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a physical level, on a spiritual level, because the Earth's atmosphere has been wiped. So these solar flares that are coming through are really affecting us because we have no protection anymore. It's like up to us to protect ourselves energetically, physically, all the pieces. Now, I definitely, like, whatever the anomaly keeps appearing to be, is it going to be a landmass, or is it literally an opening in the dimensional sphere, and people are coming through, beings are coming through, consciousness is coming through? That question we will never really know, unless the landmass definitely pops up, and then, well. And the piece about the land mass coming up, which is what I was showing, like, just when I was getting ready for this live stream, it made sense, right? So like the land mass surfacing between Africa and Brazil, South America and South Africa. It's like, you know, if we look at those two countries and then all the ocean, if something does surface there, it's gonna, you know, like, our universe and society is created on a, you know, dark light aspect. Like, there's always a vacuum, you know, like when we push something up, something comes down, like a magnetic, like there's always an opposite, right? I'm not sure about Saturn affecting this, but I'm going to talk about the twin solar system, because I do believe that is playing into effect as well. So when we look at the landmass, if that is a landmass surfacing, you know, it's interesting, the tunnel, and it's not a tunnel, like huge energy vortex through, would kind of suck through Turkey. Now, when we look at that, Turkey is like the birthplace of humanity, right? If we look back through history, his story, okay, let's read between the lines here. Tartaria, all the things, history is what they want us to know, and the truth is being shown. And that's the piece about consciousness awakening. And if we look at the 2030 agenda, I'm like, Terrence Howard just blew that out the water. Like, if we looked at, so, okay, let's talk about 2024 Black Line. So in April 2020, I did another world energy update, and I was showing like the next 10-year trajectory of, you know, the humanity from 2020 to 2030. Now, I don't know much about the specific official 2030 agenda. I haven't read any books on it. I haven't done proper video research. Like, I'm not a person who sits there and like goes into that world, because it's just never interested me. I'm like, let me just do my purpose work and let me just change the world, right? So I've always been that person. But when you are following your intuition, you're always showing bits and pieces that you need to know. And this is the basis that I teach in Trust Intuition. If you want details about that course, just comment trust below. Because when we are just doing our purpose work, which is what Trust Intuition leads you to, you have to be able to trust the intuition to bring your unique purpose onto the earth, because you are here for a reason, and only you have your specific blueprint to bring your unique purpose to earth. And when everybody is bringing their unique purpose to earth, not a carbon copy of somebody else, not anything that is on the planet yet, like, this is what changes humanity. And this is you know, you have to trust yourself enough, with all the ridicule, with all the hate, with all the black sheep stuff, with all the, you know, pieces that you are facing as a leader in the process of bringing a new system to the planet. And in 2020, I was showing that 10-year trajectory, and at 2024, I saw it as a black line. So if I was seeing each year as lines, right, and I was getting information about each year, for example, 2024 I just saw as a black line, and I was like, well, what is that? I was like, oh, is that when everyone's going to die from the juice? Or is that, you know, the juice? Or is that when everyone's going to, like, glitch out? Or, like, is there going to be an earthquake? Or, I don't know, like, over the years, we've all been trying to figure out what the black line is. Now, there's no doubt that consciousness is rapidly evolving right now. Like, there's been a sort of a shift since sort of like mid to August last year. Like, it's just like accelerated. Like, it's like someone's turned the switch up, like, here we go. Like on a boat or something, I don't know. Like, you know, like pulling the lever up. Like, it's like, okay, it's go time. There's no qualms about that. Around, like, consciousness is just rapidly accentuated. Yeah, I have talked a little bit about it, Abby. When she just said, I can't believe it's been 4 years since you talked about this. And I'm like, I have done bits and pieces, but I've just been doing my own thing. And because I only do these world updates and predictions when I've got a strong message to share, I don't just do them for the sake of doing them. It's really like when there's all these pieces of puzzle coming together. And as I said on my link in my bio, you can always check that page. It's called What on Earth is Going On. It's a page on my website, and every bit of update that I've done over the years is listed on that page. And I always put the latest one up the top of the page. So yeah, Bianca says I wrote notes down from it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, since it first came through, thank you. Yeah, it feels like a year ago. I know, right? It's sort of like there's been a glitch in time. And it's interesting that now we're at 2024 and the black line, and we've all been trying to figure it out. And, my client would always say to me, she's like, I see it like a heartbeat, like on the monitor, like the heart monitor scale. And she's like, it's like the black line, like, beep. And she's like also trying to figure that out. It's like, is that when people die or is that? And then, it's interesting because obviously at the end of last year, I'm like, oh, it's 2024, black line's coming up. What does it mean? And now we're here. And whilst the eclipses have been huge, like the biggest geonometrics, that's Archangel Metatron coming through with his geonometrics. He came through with the sacred geonometrics meditation in February 2020 and said this is for 5G and EMF protection and helps to bridge the gap between dimensions from the 10th to the 12th dimension, which I see is like our DNA, and this is the bridge that he makes. So if you want his meditation, it's $15. Just comment Archangel below and I'll give you his specific sacred geonometrics. When he came through and I was like, oh, sacred geometry, and he's like, no, sacred geonometrics. I can't find anything on the internet about geonometrics, but I'm like, he was really adamant that's what it is. Now it's interesting because then when we look at timeline switches, yes, timelines have sped up. 100% they've sped up, like ridiculous. It's like, okay, turn the boat engine thing. I don't know, is that how it goes? I don't know, I've not been in a boat. So anyway, and just on that meditation too, so Archangel Metatron helps to focus. He helps, focusing on your thing, like blinkers on, stay in your own lane, get your purpose work done. He really helps with children with ADD, ADHD, because as we know, attention dialed into a higher dimension, it's really about channeling and focusing your purpose. So, and the piece with, the distractions and the darkness, I feel like the darkness has increased in the last couple of weeks as well. And I'm like, oh, how does that that feels like a correlation between the solar flares and the geometric storms, geomagnetic storms. Okay, we've got Archangel Metatron, sacred geometrics. Okay, we've got that clear. And so now I'm talking about solar storms coming through with those pieces there. So, okay. So what is the main message here? Oh, so let's talk about the 2024 black line. So here we are. Okay, we've had the anomaly has been surfacing. Is that a new land mass, or is that a consciousness? Now, it's interesting because just like I said on the weekend, I was showing a different video about it, and it scrolled back through to 1989 and it disappeared and come back and disappeared and come back. And I was like, well, that's really significant. Now, I would love to know the consciousness and world shifts over those years. I didn't go researching that, but I'm like, is that what it is? Like, why does it keep appearing? Why does it keep appearing in the same spot and it's not a landmass? Is it surfacing or is it not, right? And so these pieces here. So when we look at 2024 black line, the intense eclipse this March, April, then we've had intense solar storms along with Mercury retrograde. Now, all of that sort of finished, right? Like we're now at almost starting June. It's 27th of May today. And what's really interesting is that then last week, Joe Rogan did his podcast with Terrence Howard. Now, maybe I'm ignorant, but I'd never really heard of Terrence Howard before, but everyone was sort of sharing it on, social media. I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm always showing little bits that I need to know, right? And I'm like, I feel like I need to watch that, right? Just with certain people saying certain things. I was like, that's interesting. Let me listen. And I was like, mind blowing in essence that he's totally changed the trajectory of humanity. And I'm like, oh, here is the black line. Now, leading up to, so I watched it, I think it was on Thursday or something. Listen to it, I guess. Listen. And like leading up to that, I'd sort of felt like I was hitting this wall. and I was like, what is going on? Like, and when I say hitting a wall, like it was like a dimensional wall, and I was very conscious of it, and I was sharing it in detail in my Telegram, my private Telegram channel, intuitive channel, which is where I share daily updates, energy updates, do psychic readings, like intuitive messages that you need to hear. That's a 2-week free trial if you want to get in there. It's like getting a personal message from me. You stay in tune with what's going on collectively with psychic readings for the group. So if you want that, just comment channel below and I'll send you the details for that. It's $11 a month. There's a 2-week free trial. You can also get access to the full moon ceremony if you choose to. So just comment channel below if you want that. And I was sharing this in detail last week in the intuitive channel, and everyone's like, oh my God, that's what's going on. And I'm like, I think I'm ready for an intuitive update, world update, because I'm like, this is what's happening. We're like hitting this consciousness wall. Now, when I listened, like I was really feeling that, shared that, and then I listened to Terrence Howard and Joe Rogan, and what really fascinated me, and just by the way, like I saw some people afterwards sharing about, oh, he's talking about the flower of life and the Metatronic flower of life, which is the flower of death, right? It's the death that comes into, you know, it's like the flower of death. Like the flower of life is actually the flower of death with the sacred geometry. And I'm like I went down that rabbit hole, and I did reassess and change some things in my life and in my business. And at the same time, I've come to another piece here. And when we really look at the truth about this reality, like, unfortunately, this is reality. Unfortunately, this is our dimension. For people who want to fight this reality and fight like, oh, we should be doing different things. Like the reality is that there's a line, and there's, I'm just going to put it here. Now, I don't know that I changed the camera around, so you might not be able to read this. And so I'm just going to, it'll be back to front. Yeah, it's back to front, I think. So just bear with me. I didn't turn the camera around, just bear with it. So the reality is that this dimension that we currently live in is this. There's light at one end, and there's dark at another, and then there's a balance in the middle. And unfortunately, for those who want to, fight this, the reality is that this is the current dimension that we live in. Now, is this reality of this dimension shifting? I don't know, maybe. Who knows? Who really knows, right? But this is the aspect of it. So whether you're in the flower of life, and that's like the Metatronic death line, or whether you're in the, it's not ketonic, the other end of the spectrum of the flower of life, basically, the actual life one, they're just ends of the scale. It's a bit like whatever we perceive judgment on is what it's going to be for us. This is the truth of the matter. This is the third eye. And what we're hearing either side is just here. Is truth. Third eye is the truth. Seeing the truth about reality. What are you hearing is dependent on what your perception is, dependent on what you have absorbed, what your generational lineage is and has been, and you have been imprinted through all these dimensional grids that you've come into this life on, through your soul bloodline and your physical bloodline family generation. There's 2 generational lines that you deal with when you're dealing with clearing karmic and clearing different pieces. It's like there's a soul lineage that you have, and then there's your family generational lineage now, today. Okay, so there's 2 that you're working with when you're clearing, which is kind of freaking interesting, right? How deep do we want to go? For those who can actually see, yes, that's right, exactly. So when we look at these pieces, right, so I was getting a little bit off topic. Oh yeah, so I just wanted to touch on the flower of life, flower of death, those pieces. I'm like, at the end of the day, you're going to be affected by it, by what you perceive and which rabbit hole you want to travel. Because at the end of the day, that's all it is. So I'm just going to leave that there for the moment. So coming back to the fact that I was feeling that dimensional wall hit, and then listening to Terrence Howard, I was like, that's what I'm feeling, right? Because he literally just changed trajectory of humanity. Meaning everything that we've believed about reality to date. Now he's got however many patents, and he's been working on his projects for years, okay? It just so happens that Joe Rogan brought it to big light to a wider community, I personally see, right? And so when we look at these pieces and this wall, like he basically, like it was really interesting to me when he shared about, we've got this physical, this is not his this is my interpretation of understanding of trying to explain something right now. So go and watch his stuff. Go and watch that podcast if you haven't. So basically between me and the camera and all of these pieces, between me and this board, there's actually not space, there's actually something there. Now we've known that, right? There's atoms and energy and like there's something, it's not actually space, it's a different density of reality, right? So this is a dense piece of reality, like it's just different densities. We know that, okay? And so then we know when we come down, right, through the different dimensions of spheres, okay? I've always seen reality of spheres. I've been showing that in a meditation and with my guides. And so then it's like we come into different densities, right? Now, what's really fascinating to me is that I can't remember off the top of my head because I was going to watch it again and read notes, take notes, and I was just like, oh. So the trajectory of humanity hit this wall because, and we've known, you and me, we've known, you wouldn't be watching me here at Reality Awareness if you didn't believe this, okay? We've known that what they teach in schools is not correct. We've known that what they have taught us about history is not correct. We've known that there's a lot of truth coming out with Tartaria and all of these other pieces about history. We know that it's not correct. And in that, right, like we've been the crazy ones, like living on a different reality of humanity, that we're the crazy ones because we're outside of the system. Now we know that anyone outside of the system and fighting the system, so to speak, is going to be called crazy. They don't want their system to collapse. Well, I'm sorry, but if you look on my what on earth is going on page, where I've stored all of my previous predictions, down the page a bit is a really awesome video that explains the collapse. And the only thing that I was like, okay, so I'll just keep going there. So there's an awesome video. It's a lady who did it years ago. She's a psychologist and she actually built a sugar cube. You know, the sugar cubes, the white sugar cubes are so bad for you that I used to like eat so much of as a kid. Anyway, talk about addict. The white sugar cubes. She did a sugar cube pyramid. Some of you might have seen this video. It might be really helpful to watch because a lot of us, sometimes we get down. You know, we go through phases of being down because we're like, the system's so big, the government's so big, etc., etc. How are we going to help collapse that system, or how's that even going to fall? Like, we sort of feel powerless. When you watch her sugar cube pyramid, so like I said, it's on that page. You can find the link in my bio. If you scroll down, you'll see the sugar cube pyramid. She's got an awesome explanation that it's kind of like, we don't break it from the top. What's happening is consciousness is pulling it from this way and it's shifting this way. So okay. So we're hitting this wall, okay? Now, Terrence basically, in a really amazing way, basically destructed and deconstructed the distortion in schools, universities, and the entire system in the way that he broke down what is actually true about science and humanity. And the piece that got me, that blew my mind, was, yes, that feels so right, is that it's not an infinite system that goes on forever and ever. It's actually a closed system, because the waves, like, you know, for whatever he said, he's like, for it to come back, you know, when you throw a rock in a pond and the waves go out, they hit the edge of the pond and then they ripple back in. And with whatever he was explaining, I had to like rewatch the little bit. I was like, yeah, that feels so true, because it's like we're in this closed system. Now, a lot of people have always said, oh, we're in the enslavement system. We're in the trapped system. We're in this, you know, we're slaves trapped in this dimension, well, on this earth. People think it's a flat earth because it's a terrarium. And I think that flat earthers, you know, understand that we're closed and we're trapped. It's not a globe, so to speak, but I feel it's more dimension. And that's why there's this fight and hate between it's flat earth, it's round earth. It's like, no, it's actually a dimension, guys. Like, and we're quote unquote stuck in this dimension, meaning we are, I want to say, imprisoned, right? There's a lot of those imprisonment things going around of like imprisoned structural society, because we're enslaved or stuck in this dimension is more the accurate piece of it, right? Like it's a dimension. Now, I'm sort of jumping here, but bear with me. So I was I watched the series The 100, and I understand that watching shows gives them permission, but I also watch these shows, only ones that I'm guided to, because I know that I'm being shown so much. When I moved out of society, and I currently live on 250 acres in the middle of nowhere, like I've undergone the biggest initiation in understanding reality. I've been taken away from society, and that's a whole nother explanation of what or why that is. Just bear with me while I open this door. Okay, so it's an enclosed system, right? And so it's like we're in this dimension. Now, again, it's a sphere. They're all spheres, and that's where the globe comes from. But it's a dimension rather than, and so we're quote unquote stuck in this dimension. Now, so I was guided to watch The 100. As I said, I know that it gives them permission, but I only watch things that I get messages from, I understand pieces, because we also know that they show us a lot of truth in it, and it's there for people who can decode it. And I feel that I have a real gift for that, because I decode a lot of energetics in people, understand stuff. Anyway, so that's just my gift. So when we look at, like on The 100, I think it's the last season. It's like, I don't know, 7 seasons or something. And it's so weird. Like I watched it a couple of years ago, and then for some reason I was guided to watch it again. I'm like, the whole freaking season. I'm like, oh well. It didn't seem like there was anything else worth watching. So I was like, whatever, I'll watch it again. And so, it gives them permission. So watching shows, apparently I can't understand this, and I can. Watching like the Netflix shows gives the bad people who are entrapping us here, is there a name for them? It's beyond the government, okay? You guys know it's beyond the government. It gives them permission for them to do what they're doing to humanity by us watching the show. Now, I've never really understood that, and I'm like, well, how does us watching it give them permission? We don't give them permission to harm humanity or fuck us up, basically. Like, we don't do that. Like, we don't give them permission, but watching the shows give them permission. I've sat with that for years. I'm like, how does that, and just driving the other day, and that's why I know I was ready for a live stream, all this information started coming through. It was like, it gives them permission in a manipulative way. And I was like, oh, there's the whole narc thing playing out, right? So coming back to, on the season 7, and I only picked this up the second time I watched it, on the last season, and it's interesting, the 2 shows that I've been guided to watch recently again have now been removed from Netflix. It comes up and says leaving soon, and I was like, what? I just watched that again and it's leaving. I'm like, this is interesting. So on the last season of The 100, it's like they take them to, here we go. They take them to, this is not like, this is my trying to explain it to you guys, okay? There's like 4 or 5 planets in a system. Maybe there's more, but they showed like about 4 planets, I think. Maybe there was more. And basically they're like, which, if we look at our current solar system, it's kind of adds up a little bit. I'm just going to use the 4, okay, for now. So there was like four planets, and there was like a main planet that was like the home base of the main people that were trying to ascend to, I can't remember what word they used for it, but basically they were trying to, the main leader was convoluted, I say, personally. He was trying to save humanity by basically getting them to merge with AI. However, when the main person finally got to the AI person who was in charge, which was like out in the universe somewhere, which, I don't know, is that God? Whatever, let's see. Had to pass some sort of test, and it was like, why do you want to do this? And then the like lady savior came in, and she's like, no, you're not doing that to humanity, right? And it's kind of interesting. Now, just jumping a little bit, but let's come back to, there was like four planets in the system, and basically if you were a bad person, you got imprisoned on another dimensional planet. And what's really interesting is they talked about time, and they talked about how, I can't remember if it was like the further away it was or closer to the sun. I can't remember that bit. But basically, down here on this planet, time is different. And what is 100 years here is like a day or something here. So if you were a bad person, you got imprisoned on this dimension, which is a planet that looked like Earth. And the only way that you could reach that planet was via an anomaly. I get tripped up on that word when I think about it too much. Anomaly that would open, because they've opened the vortex here, through specific structures, right? On the show, there was a, and this is interesting because the Emerald Tablet's been coming back to me recently, and I'm like, what is the Emerald Tablet even? And I know it's been translated and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, something more to it. And it's interesting because on the show, they showed all these different symbols, and there was a structure, like a metal structure, that when you press the correct symbols in the specific order, that was basically the GPS to get to this dimension, or this one here, or this one here. And the way they traveled through them was via anomalies that bubbled up and opened when they had opened the code, that opened up a portal in time that allowed them to arrive here. And it was the only way that you could exit and leave off this dimension. Isn't it interesting that there's an anomaly popping up in between South Africa and South America right now? Oh, okay. All right. So let's just leave that for a minute, okay? Now, it just helped me to understand the prison planet, and everyone's sort of fighting about the flat earth or the round earth. And I'm like, nah, it's dimensions. It's dimensions. And then so in this entire, system, right, is this sort of piece. Now, it kind of makes sense when we look at Interstellar. When we look at the movie Interstellar, when they go out into space, and we sort of know this, that time is different here in this reality, right? It's like a closed loop system, and time, we age here, right? We know that, but we see it in so many movies. Okay, what else did I want to say? So what's the next most important thing? I've explained that. Oh, and so then when we look at what Terrence Howard shared, and basically... Oh, so the other piece to all of this, on the show, they raise babies on this episode, season 7, I don't know what episode, the last season. They raise babies in, capsules, like humans don't need to carry babies in their bellies anymore. And if there's a defect, they can see it and fix it before the babies grow into full term in these capsules. Now, when we rewind back to Tartaria unravelings, we see that there's like baby farms. Now, that's kind of interesting. Now, when we look at what Terrence said about it's a closed system, that just sort of, it's not finite, and it basically destructed everything that has been taught in schools and universities and all the pieces, like in an instance. Yes, like the Matrix too. Exactly. Artificial wombs. Thank you. Yes. And now we start to see where it's kind of like all of this makes sense. Now, at the end of the day, nobody knows the truth. And the piece about Netflix and digitalization and all the things is that everything's been convoluted, and who knows the truth, because they do that on purpose as well, right? It's like everything's imprinted on us. Everything is mucked up. There's a generational physical bloodline, and then there's our soul bloodline, and then there's the infiltration onto this planet. What's interesting about these pieces is that when they have these baby farms, then they raise them in their own little schooling system, with the teacher teaching them what the children need to be imprinted with, and now believe and grow up creating a society that's going to transcend to AI, because that's going to save humanity from the bad guys. Well, who's the bad guys? Right? Because everyone's getting killed and wiped off all these other dimensions, right? So many different pieces. Okay, what did I want to say next about this? Okay, so with Terrence Howard bringing out his patents, and it's so interesting when he shared about one of his patents had already been taken, but they don't have the full information. And what we look at with VR reality now, virtual reality, is only like a snippet of what his patent actually is, because they stole it and now he can use what they've already created to make his patent better because he has the patent, he has all the rights and doesn't have to give them anything. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then do you know what came through last night when I was getting ready for this live stream? Was I was like, what came to me was like, when Terrence said that, I was like, well, that was interesting. And then last night I was showing, I was like, who are these souls? Who are these souls? Who are these souls? When we strip the human physicality away, who are these souls fighting with each other? Who are these souls fighting with each other? Does that make sense? Like, it was like, oh, and so interesting when we talk about bloodline, physical, generational, and soul generational. And I was like, who are these souls? Like, if we look at this entire sort of system, and I mean, maybe that's not correct. Maybe I watched it for no reason, but it kind of explains all the fighting going on and all the different spiritual groups. And, you know, people say that Joe Rogan's the other, what is it? The fighting side of, like, you know, what's that word? I always forget the word. Controlled opposition. You know, it's kind of like, who really actually knows? But then also it's like, it kind of makes sense. And it makes sense that it's all dimensions and spheres, not flat earth or round earth or globe. Like, it's all dimensional aspects. We know that time travel is real. We know that there's more to what we have in our little closed system. We know that, right? We know all of these aspects and these pieces. So what's really interesting about all of those pieces as well is that when we look at, like, Terrence coming out and now saying that, what I felt when the hit the wall thing came through, I was like, oh, when he said all the things he said, and I don't know, is it up to 10 million views now? I don't know. Imagine the gatekeepers, yeah. Imagine all the university scholars, every, like, he just literally decimated every single industry on the planet. He basically decimated the industrial revolution that has been created to be this, right, for the last 200 years or whatever it is. Because what happened before 200 years ago, right? Like, what happened, like, anyway, it's a whole nother live stream. But he basically decimated every single industry on the planet. He's really, really interesting to me about all of that as well, is that that's the wall. Everything just came to a grinding halt. Even though people were going to tell him he's crazy and not believe it, and he's for the Metatronic closed flower of life loop, which, as we know, really doesn't fucking matter. Like, matter doesn't matter. Our perception of matter is what matters, right? Pun intended, obviously. It's like, boom, everything just came to a grinding halt. And now we're going to come back this way. And I was like, there's the 2024 black line, baby. It's like glitch in the matrix. For those of you who have been dealing with heavy grief, heavy trauma, facing things that you hadn't faced before, it's like, whoop, yep, needs to come out because we're heading this way now. What happens when the wave hits the edge of the pond and then it comes back in? Oh, it comes, to another dimension? Oh, system failure? Yeah. Right? There's the 2024 black line. So those of you who've been dealing with heavy trauma, heavy grief, feeling defeat. Like, defeat's lower than hopelessness, right? For those of you who've been feeling the darkest of darkest, you've actually hit the wall. You've felt the humanity consciousness. We're not going that way anymore. We're going this way. And I'm so curious what comes out of this over the next few years. Because as we know, when there's a new idea that hits the planet, there's a ripple. And then that also hits a wall and it comes back, right? Now, what's really interesting as well about this is that that level of like defeat and this new trajectory that we now go in, like, I think I must have been sharing it in the Telegram channel group. I was sharing it somewhere, or maybe it was in Tuesday Tarot, even one of the cards. It was like, the timelines have shifted. We've felt that. We've felt the timeline shift coming up, 100%. And they're like rapidly shifting. As I said, they're not lines anymore. I think I said a couple of years ago in one of my updates, they're not lines, they're the squares. We're not going in lines anymore. They're like squares. And we're like jumping from different timeline pieces. Like they're not actually this trajectory or this trajectory. It's like it's shifting like this. Maybe like puzzle pieces coming in to like build a whole new thing. I don't know. But when we look at the obliteration of the, like every industry, the construction industry, the technological industry, the education industry, probably the medical industry, like he literally changed the trajectory. Now, as I said, what's really interesting is that, you know, who are these souls fighting with one another? Like on a deeper level, let's remove the human skin and body. Who are these souls? Like, you know, who is behind Meta apart from the creator Zuckerberg, if that's what we are told? Who is actually, that's creating now Apple, you know, or whatever, who's creating the virtual reality, who actually quote unquote took his half patent information, doesn't have the full inside of what that technology could actually create for reality, and they've created it quick because, you know, we want to be the best, or we want to, like, I don't know, whatever the story is. Like, it's just interesting, right? I'm like, who are these souls? Another interesting snippet and piece is that on that show, it makes a lot of sense because they talk about, okay, sorry, I've got to say this bit first. So Terrence also spoke about something to do with the way that, I can't remember exactly, this, I needed to rewatch it again, but you guys can watch it and get your pieces from it. I know if I rewatch it and re-listen, I'll get more. So when he spoke about different densities and dimensions and further away from the sun, and that's why aliens have the different eyes and stuff, because we adapt to our density, etc. I was like, oh, that makes total sense. But then he said something about our blood, or he said something about the moving in the different densities and water turns into plasma or something like that. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. But it just, I was like, yep, that makes sense. And we've known that our body is like 70 to 90% water. We've known that water holds memory. We know that water is a communicator. Water is messenger. Water is alive. And it's our blood. And our blood is plasma. And the water turns, when it's pressurized, turns into plasma or something like that. And I was like, oh, that just makes so much sense. Right? Now, okay, let's have a look here. What else do I want to say? Just those little pieces. Okay, so it's interesting too that the education industry, like specifically schools and university systems, have kept us in this loop, right? Water is also a conduit. Yes. So schooling system and university kept us in this loop, in this closed system, right? And if we look at thought creates reality. So we want to channel that thought to create a specific system. But if thought is destructed and reconstructed, we create a different reality. We know that our thought is the most powerful creator on the planet if followed by action. So we know that God says, for, what does he say? What is that saying? God said, let there be light. But for God to even say that, there had to be sound for him to actually voice that. But before that, he had to have a thought to create that. So when people talk, how does the simulation work, or what is creation? How did it originate? And I'm like, well, first add a thought. And people have disagreed with me with that. I'm like, that's fine. We can all agree to disagree. And I'm like, thought thought is a channel for the energy that then is created. Plants, everything did not get here or in any dimension without first there being a thought to, like it's like a beacon, it's a laser. Zzz, here, this is how we create with our thoughts, right? So we're creating with our thoughts like this. So God said, let there be light. Now, thought is what created this reality. It created the universe. It created everything we can think of. People think it's energy and light that brings forth reality, but it's actually thought. Because for light and energy to even move anywhere, there had to be a thought to move that somewhere, right? What creates thought? What creates that channel of that? What channels thought? Well, we do, but what first created the thought that is the channel of it? So people think it's a simulation, but first someone had to think about creating a simulation for it to be a simulation. Where did that come from? So the emerald tablets are a language that few understand, many misinterpret, and less actually can read nor translate. The emerald tablet is actually heart. It's the frequency of the heart. It's the heart chakra consciousness that channels forth a language that only consciousness understands and can transmute the sense vibrations of this reality to transcend time. Most know this as love, but it's actually consciousness. Your heart is what allows you to travel to different dimensions, because when you travel, you go to where you're thinking about. Even on this, it's interesting because even on this show, they showed that just to think it is where you end up. And we've known that with time travel. Yeah? We live in artificial lights. Yeah, well, what is light? Yep. So within your mind is the portal that accesses the heart. And through here is the golden ratio of time. This portal acts as a vice trying to unravel the dimensions, not ready before their time, and will crush anyone who walks forth but is ready to be given the dimensions of time and space reality. That was something that channeled through to me on Saturday night, 2 nights ago. Yeah. Okay. So what else is really important about this update? Okay, let's come back to the anomaly and Turkey dropping into the earth. And what's kind of interesting is that when we look at Turkey being the birthplace of humanity, do we know? Things sort of point to that. When we look at the landmass or that anomaly appearing, interesting, portals to other dimensions, it goes away, it comes back, kind of makes sense to me. Given the anomaly is, you know, and if we look at, and sorry, just on that too, like the anomaly there was lots of different ones, but there was one that was showing lots of underground, and also there was one that was showing that was deep inside a lake, and you can't swim down, like one of the girls was trying to swim down to go back through the anomaly for which she came, but she couldn't because it was too deep, and the compression of the pressure to even swim that deep. We know that we can't swim that deep without our ears and all the equalizing and all the things, right? You have to have a special suit that can transcend the things, which is so interesting because that's what Terrence Howard said. We can't travel to Mars, but with his technology, we can create a vehicle that can go there that doesn't get crushed through the different densities of reality. And then on this show, they're showing that there was a suit that you think about where you want to go, or you think to ask the question, is that via neural link? Interesting. You just think where you want to go, and that opens the anomalies and the putting in the specific codes to get there to open the portal that goes there. Then you travel there via that thought that you put on a special suit that allows you to travel through the different dimensions and densities to go there. Now, on another aspect, Justin from the Liquid Crystals, several years ago, I attended one of his talks, and he said that when you're channeling the archangels, you're actually not getting, he didn't say the real archangels, but you're getting like tiniest snippet, because for an archangel to actually be here in front of you or to attune to your energy is actually like their vibration would totally obliterate us as humans, right? And it's so interesting when you hear about UFO encounters that people get sick afterwards, or they get weird burns or anything like that, because the energy it's not of our density, and so it burns us, right? Or it obliterates us, or any of those pieces. So lowering their vibration to communicate to us, yeah, or traveling, yeah, it's really interesting, right? So I believe that we still get a portion, like I still believe we get them, but it's at a ratio that we can receive and also understand and interpret. Okay, and so given, yeah, that's so interesting around the, you know, like how much of history do we see is fighting mythical creatures? And if we look at what they are training us baby farms into a certain structure of reality via our thought, and the whole piece between 2020 and 2030, I believe, is that the rapidest shift in conscious evolution, and people are talking about like AI is going to take over. And I believe that we've hit this wall, that we're on a different trajectory now. And maybe with Terrence's technology we might. But the thing that was really interesting to me, and I've always said and believed this, is that we're not here to fight the old systems. You can't fight a narcissist into awakening. Doesn't happen. It doesn't work, right? We know that. And so you can't fight an old system to bring in a new model. It won't work. And the thing that I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Why is he keep going, go to the universities, I'm like, no one's gonna fucking listen to you, mate. Like, you have your unique purpose here to change humanity. You build the system. You build a new system. You can't fight the old system. You know, our unique purpose energy is wasted trying to fight people who are not awake yet. We are here to bring through a new system. So you create the new system and the old system collapses because we're focusing all our new thought here. So I don't know why he's wasting his time and energy trying to fight the universe. Like, that piece didn't make sense to me. But anyway, that's what I'm here for, to awaken people's purpose and help them understand and channel their purpose into the unique system that is what it's for. We're not here to break down the old system. We do that by focusing on the new one. The old one collapses. When enough people move over, right? Okay. So I'm also going to talk about, I'm just going to jump back to the January 2020 prediction that came through when the being came through and interrupted my float. So I actually wrote from, you know, getting out of the float and writing on my phone. So it goes, the anomaly goes underneath the radar, it pops off the radar and then disappears again. So it pops on and off. Now I did have dates, and I really, one of my prediction things is I don't like putting dates on, but I'm going to read exactly what I wrote and we'll sort of dissect it. So, so it pops off the radar and then disappears again. In 2022, the government world order will collapse. Eastern coastline to extinction. With a new Eastern philosophy rising in the West, a new sunrise will rise and begin from the Eastern border or from the Western culture. Etiquette from the south of France will remind of the crumbling pieces that will fall off the western border of the African plains, seeing devastation that no human has seen before. This comes from the arise from the Syrian undertaking and lapis lazuli shifts that will collapse through to April, June, and August. A new structure will cover up the place that can only be buried for so long. The truth will surface and no longer can be buried under propaganda. The eastern shores will be different. That's exactly what channeled through. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Now, a lot of it was like 2022. And it's interesting that from April, June, August. Now, if we look at what's happening now and the anomalies coming up now, it's kind of interesting with these pieces around the anomaly now coming up again. What are we? May, June. April, May, June. Is it something to do with the eclipse? Now, I did reference in that video, in December 2019 was the big eclipse that crossed Saudi Arabia, and this eclipse we've just had now has crossed over America. So not sure if that's relevant, but felt called to say that as well anyway. Now, what's interesting that was in 2020 that channeled through, and we've also seen videos being released around the African plate that has that massive crack in it. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that. If you type in African plate crack, maybe, I don't know if the crack's the right word to come up. There's on the edge of Africa, there's a huge crack in the earth. Alongside, we've also seen recently in Iceland, there's also a massive crack, like a massive big crack, like through like the biggest volcano and the biggest rift in the earth. So these things are actually happening. The rise of the Bermuda Pyramid, yeah. Different anomalies are bringing up different portals to different dimensions, right? And if we look at reality will never be the same, especially if Terrence's what he's saying is true, because who really knows, and we've hit that wall. It does make sense to me. The closed system and the ponds, Denalio, a fault. Sorry, that's it. Yeah, the earthline faults. Thank you. They've uncovered cities, exactly. Like so much is coming to light, right? And if we look at Inception movie, there's all these different layers of dream state. So I'm going to do a podcast on dreams because there's so much information that wants to come through about dreams. And if we look at these fault lines, and then if we look at, you know, when I've studied Tartaria, and I went down the Tartaria rabbit hole because I'm always showing things that I would like to see, need to see, and I get all this information, right? And I went down to the Tartaria rabbit hole, and all I could think about was Inception. I'm not sure if you've seen that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. I've watched it many times, and I've received like understand the dream state a lot, and I'm like, that's just reality. And then if you watch The Sandman on Netflix, he talks about the different, you know, dimensions of reality, and that the dream state and the mythical beings and all those things only exist because we do, because we are the ones that dream. And I've always said for a long time, and I wrote about this in my book as well, that you can find on Amazon, Ancient Blooded Healer, You're One of a Kind. I wrote about this, that we are the technology. Now, if you look at these things, you know, in the baby farms, I'm like, yeah, we are the fucking technology. Are we the alien? And the lands beyond Antarctica walls, yes, all of that, And we're crazy to think that we're the smart ones. I know, right? I've always said we're the technology. I'm not saying we're the smartest. Definitely not. But yeah, like we are the technology. We are the reason that, you know, a lot of other things exist. But I also believe that everything exists because everything exists. Yeah. Supernatural mechanic. I like that. Okay. Okay, so I just want to touch on a couple other things. Oh yeah, the twin solar system. Let's talk about the twin solar system. We are the technology, yeah. Oh yeah. So we are the technology. The twin solar system affecting us. Now also, and I know I'm referring to this show a lot, but it was so eye-opening to me. I'm like, this is what everyone's fighting about in all the spiritual communities, and you're right, I'm wrong, flat earth, round earth, like, you know, I'm like, this explains it all. And why it's a bit convoluted and why no one can really hanker down the truth. But if we look at, you know, that the 100, they do show a lot in there around even the twin solar system. So it's a bit of a winding story, and there is 7 seasons. And basically the first season is that there's a ship in space with humans on it that have been on ice. What's that? Is it cryo freeze or cryo sleep? You know, and they're also... Like there's another ship that's been on cryo for like sleep for and they were prisoners in the prison that got sent into space because it didn't matter if they died basically, and they got sent on the ship to go and mine different asteroids or planets, and it didn't matter if they didn't come back because they were prisoners, right? And they're on cryo sleep so they can stay for thousands of years if they needed to in space. Which is kind of interesting given all the convoluted pieces that everyone's like, where did we come from, and why does humanity get wiped, and where do we come from again? And then there's baby farms, and then people come back from outer space, but they're human, and they're like, ugh, yeah? It's like a dual magnet and fractals. Yes, exactly, right? It's these pieces of, like, it's all so interesting. So, okay, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, the twin solar system. So long story short, basically Earth was destroyed by nuclear stuff, which happened via AI. So they blamed China, but they also blamed AI in the show, interesting. And then AI shot off out into space and stayed on a rocket to try and fix the problem, like fix the damage that they did. And they can live in space while Earth regenerates itself from the nuclear explosion, which would explain when we look at Tartarian history, that kind of makes sense-ish. So then eventually they come back down to Earth because it's safe from nuclear radiation, but there's people living in mountains that can't deal with the radiation, and they need our blood because our blood is attuned to the radiation, which also makes sense when we look at adrenochrome and we look at all of those rabbit holes. I'm like, that kind of makes sense that they need our blood to be able to walk on human Earth. And then when we look at the neural links and consciousness and the matrix style, like, you know, and if we look at dream state, when you look at Inception, they go under and they're in another reality. Like, there's so many layers here, right? So when we look at, sorry, where was it going at? The twin solar system, right? Just that little sort of preface to when Earth is uninhabitable again, then they find another planet that is somewhere light years away or whatever. And it's interesting because there's different bugs and, you know, the planet is really affected. Get this, the planet is really affected by eclipses, and it makes everybody go crazy. Unless you go underground into bunkers where you don't get affected by the eclipse and the moons. And I'm like, it's so interesting. And I'm like, how many shows have we seen where, like, there's always other planets really close by? Now, when we look at the twin solar system cover up, and if you haven't heard of that stuff, there's the Nibiru groups and the twin solar system groups and all of those pieces, that when we look at the twin solar system now coming into consciousness, right? After 20 years, so I think it's Sam Hoffman is like, he worked for the CIA or whatever and had to sign an NDA for 20 years and that got expired. And so now he's sharing all this truth. He's like, the twin solar system's always been here. And, you know, a lot of people think that they're spraying chemicals in the air to poison us. Now, I don't believe that's not true. I believe that there's an aspect of that that's true, but I believe there's a bigger cover up at play here, that they are spraying to cover up what they don't want us to see of the twin solar system beyond. But if you look carefully, and it's also the programming of what we're being schooled about, what science is and the sky and our solar system and what a cloud is. And for all of those who copped it over the years for being crazy because of cloud seeding, they're now releasing all the documentation and admitting it on government websites that yes, cloud seeding is what we do. Like, you can Google that shit. Like, you know, a lot of people like, the truth is coming out. And the thing about awakening is the truth comes out. And once the truth comes out, there's shock, there's grief, there's anger, and then there's getting on with life in a new way after this. So what is shifting on the planet is a new way of being. And I don't believe that technology is taking over and it's going to rule everything, but I believe it's going to be a big part, especially when we look at Terrence's technology and what it can do. It's like, that's a whole new world. And that allows traveling to dimensions. That allows all those pieces. That allows all those traveling to different realities and different, like, it's all real. It's all real. So on the twin solar system, just on that regard, so all the crazy weather patterns, I do believe that the twin solar system is playing into effect of that. A lot of people think that it's the HARP, and the radars do look weird when you watch the Bureau of Meteorology radars. You know, you do see all those things. What are they, right? They're the HARPs, they're the EMFs, all the electrical towers. Now, what's really interesting about the 5G towers, what's so interesting to me, is that when I first moved in here, so there's a mountain. Is it that one? Oh yeah, it's in the hills there. So you can't really see it, but you definitely can't see what I'm talking about from here. But when I first moved in here, there's a mountain directly. There's a big valley here, and I've always felt that it's a big energy line, and I am on a ley line here, so I really feel things. And the stuff that's happened to me out here, let's just say I've been in training for something, an initiation for something, because my senses are extraordinary compared to when I first moved out here, with the trauma that I've cleared and shifted and faced, and then also the adjustment to living out of society and living out on this property. And I just know I've been in training for something. I don't know what that is yet. Anyway, so when I first moved out here, there's there's a mountain with a tower on it for the, reception stuff. What is it? The 5G towers. It wasn't 5G. You couldn't get 5G out here, right? Haven't for a long time. Still not out here. then there's another tower down there. So you only get reception if you sort of stand in the line of it. So what's really interesting is that if the trees are blocking it, you can't really get good reception. So you have to stand in a place where there's no trees, which when we look at the 15-minute cities, and when we look at 5G and all of those sort of compounding 15-minute cities, let's call them, and they're knocking down all the trees, well, that's because that's the technology. Now, what's so interesting to me in the 100 is that everyone's living in basically not even tribal, like survival on Earth, and then the AI has a little, it's just like a tablet, and you take it and basically you're connected to, when you see it on the show, it's a city. It's kind of mind-blowing. Everyone's happy and everyone's okay there, but if you die, it's a bit like the Matrix style, right? If you die with it, like you still stay in the city, but you physically die in this world. Anyway, sort of went off track a little bit there, but that's interesting because there's all these pieces coming up, right? So with the 5G tower, so I've been here for 3.5 years now, and they've removed that original tower, and now there's a massive one there, and there's probably about 4 other towers, smaller towers on the big hill as well. So they're upgrading it all to make it come out into the country and all that sort of thing, of course. But what's also really fascinating to me is that on that 100 show, as I said, in season 1, when they first come down back to Earth and they send the prisoner children down, from the spaceship to make sure that Earth's survivable. So they don't really care about the prisoner children, just send the derelicts, whatever. And that's sort of the concept of, like, especially in Australia, like where all the convicts originally. And I think that's like the whole prison planet thing, right? It's just kind of interesting. And so when we look at, like they send the prisoner children down, and not only do they realize Earth's survivable, but there's also other people here. There's the tribal people, and then there's the people who live in the mountains, in the tunnels, in the mountains, who cannot survive out of the tunnels and out of the mountains without our blood, because our blood is accustomed and attuned to the radiation levels, so we can handle it, right? So little side note, but when we are getting all that fear-mongering about radiation, actually we can handle it. It's they who can't, and they will die, not us. Little side note. So, and so they can't survive without our blood. Now, what's also interesting to me is that on that show, I think it's season 2 now, that they literally show not only the people who live in the mountains who are needing our blood, and that's a whole nother story, and the way they do that's so fucking interesting. But the people that live in the mountains, in the show, they have all the towers on top of the mountains. Now, the thing that fascinates me is that when we look at where these towers are placed all around the world, the 5G towers and whatever, they're usually on mountains. And people are like, that's just because they need the height for the things to go out, the little radio frequencies to go out. I'm like, is it? What's in the mountain? We've known that there's stuff in mountains, and we've heard that down rabbit holes. And they literally show it in this thing, and they're like, it's full on. Now, in where I was going with that is that also on that show, not only do the towers emit the radio frequencies, they also block the frequencies up to space. So us humans can't have that contact up to space, which is interesting in itself. Again, the closed loop system. And what's also fascinating to me is that they also have weapons attached to the towers that emit certain radio frequencies that can flatten humans like us so that we don't get close to the mountains. Oh, that's interesting. Given that we've actually got these devices in our hands now, and they've given us these devices to emit the waves, and how interesting. And then the heavy metals that they spray, because, the metals are a conductor, let alone our blood and the water. And, not only are the someone said, I'm the fucking portal. And I'm like, yeah, we are. I so agree with that too, right? So also, not only are they placed on mountains, they're also placed on water towers. The thing, and it just, it gets to me so much, that part. Like, all the 5G and radio towers are placed on fucking water towers on top of mountains, but they're they're on top of water towers. Now we know the power of water. We know that it's alive. We know that it's consciousness. We know that we're like a condensed version of water. We're plasma, right? And we know that we conduct all of that. And that's why we connect with water. That's why our blood pressure goes down when we are next to water or even sea water. And that's why Drunvalo Michel's point of view is that we actually emerged from the water. And that's why in like these dimensions, like we've seen videos and people who have shared this information have ended up dying of like sudden causes. They've been killed for their information, that they've found anomalies down on the ocean floor, and that it's a portal to another dimension, and that we are like the water, right? And if sometimes we look at the sky and like the clouds look like the bottom of the ocean. Now people say it's HAARP and everything, and maybe it is, but it also looks like the bottom of the ocean. You know, the waves, the ripples of the sand, you know, and sand is also consciousness. When you play with sand, when you're in sand, when you are sand, it's consciousness. Yeah. So it's really interesting to me, all these pieces around the different layers of consciousness, the different pieces of, you know, like all of those pieces that everyone is fighting about in the spiritual community or in the conscious community, and I'm right, I'm wrong, this is what it is, this is, and I'm like, no, you only need to watch that show to understand that it's a dimensional system and that everyone is right in their own accord, but it's convoluted. But if we all get on the same page, we'd understand it, and then it's like, now we create a new one. Now we create what's not that. So okay, so the twin solar system, I was getting there, sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked. So twin solar system, the part that I want to share about that is it does affect us, and I really want to share that the twin solar system, I've noticed, yes, I do believe that it is the cause of, oh, I was getting there, okay, I wasn't off track. I needed to explain the towers and their weapons from the towers, and that's, so if you're near a tower, like it's gonna, I feel like it's going to affect you more, right, in a way, but it still affects us. But also with the twin solar system, and like for years before the twin solar system was even in my awareness consciously, for years, if you watch my earlier live streams, I would always talk about when people feel weird or like and I could feel it, and I saw it, and I would always say it on my live streams. I'm like, that it is literally like in our universe is traveling along. Is it? I don't know. I'd say our universe is traveling along, and then it's like another universe comes in and sort of bumps up against ours, and then it comes back out again. I always used to say that because it was always on that feeling when everyone would be like going haywire, whatever. And then the twin solar system stuff comes out, and I'm like, well, that's what I've always seen, right? So energetically, we feel all these things, and this is where fine-tuning your intuition, your chakras, looking after your body, your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your emotional health, your like all the pieces, because the more you fine tune this, the more you can work with these energies when it is pulling through all the trauma to like clear out, when it is doesn't want to send you down to the downward spiral, and then you can come out. Like, do you know what I mean? I've always said like the solar flares are like a sieve pulling out all our trauma to come through, right? So when we look at the twin solar system, and even with the weather, right, I've really noticed that it's like really still, like it is today. Barely no wind. Beautiful autumn day. And then it would be like the next day or a day or two, be like super windy, and I'm like, fuck. it's like and then it'll rain solidly for like 3 days, or just be like, it'll just be like drizzle, or just, you know, annoying rain, and then it sort of goes quiet again, and then it's like quiet again, and then the next day it's sort of like it's like 3 days of rain. I've been monitoring it, right? Because I've witnessed this, and it's like really affected by it. I've been monitoring it. And this is the thing, when you become aware of stuff, monitor it. Monitor it, how it affects you, monitor when it happens, like track it on charts. Like honestly, if you really want to understand reality and consciousness, you must track stuff. You must, like when you become aware of it, track it, notice it, and you'll witness patterns, because the universe is made up of patterns, right? And so when these when the planets come through, you'll notice it in your area, right? And we can really sort of plan for it, if you may, like, and really understand these pieces. So okay, so there's that piece. Is there anything else I want to say about twin solar system? Oh yeah, like even just the other day, I was outside cleaning up the garden, and like it's beautiful like this, And then in the afternoon, like one of my dogs gets really scared of like storms, right? Like she's like the big whinger dog, like wants to run inside under the bed. Like I've never had a dog like that. She's like that. And anyway, like I was noticed like a big flock of birds, like it started really, it's quiet like this. So when a big flock of birds, like, you know, carries on down the hill, I'm like noticing because I'm so attuned to everything. And I was like, oh, what's going on over there? And like this big flock of birds and then another flock of birds. I was like, oh, something's happening. Like it's weird. Like, you know, because there's a ley line here, I'm really notice that it's like this big channel of energy. Like it's like I see the ley lines as like an electrical cable. And so when there's energy passing through the ley line and they get stirred up for whatever reason, it's like, you know, when you get a hose and it's like flicking around everywhere, or like the ropes at the gym and it's like they move like that. Like when there's lots of energy moving through, it's like that. So the ley lines are like that. So it makes us go like, you know, if you're not aware of it, that's when we go a little bit wired and crazy in our emotions, or we're crying lots or whatever. Anyway, so I noticed the birds and then I was like, oh, I was like looking at the clouds and I'm like, maybe it's going to rain. Couldn't see anything. And then not long after, and then she's like whinging like there's going to be like, and the wind picked up, and then like she was like wanting to go inside and whinging, and I'm like, what the hell? And I was like, oh yeah, like, but then I noticed, and it literally, because there's lots of space and sky out here, it literally just came over through the trees and sort of just went over that way. And I was like, that's a planet. That's literally a planet. When you study the twin solar system, you start to understand and see them. So I don't see it as a planet, but it's the cloud. When it hits our atmosphere, it's all the clouds and the rain, and because it's all electricity, right? And Sam Hoffman's been saying that about the electrical universe, right? Before, you know, Terrence had also said it because he understands that, but now everyone sort of knows that. But Sam Hoffman and the understanding of the twin solar system, it's not a gravitational universe, it's electrical universe. And when we look at anomalies and when we look at portals opening up, like it's not based on gravity, it's based on electricity. And we are electricity. So allowing your energy to come into alignment with the electrical currents through your body, and how metal, so the toxic heavy metals, and when you've got tattoos, you really want to be working on that even more, right? So it's like that, you know, what happens when we put something metal on a power line, right? We don't do that. So you can imagine like we're being bombarded with sprays and even all our foods and everything, with heavy metals, and that sits in our system, so it mucks up the electrical current. So when there are electrical currents, or when there are upgrades of light code or whatever, like we're getting convoluted for it. So it's really important to be aware of that too and how it affects you. Okay, so Lena says, so funny that this conversation is happening right now while I'm working and about to sign my company up to the hydropower. That's funny. Yeah, the hydropower. Yeah, so interesting, right? I had a dream a while back that they installed these towers saying that they were to detect and threaten, defend us. And it's so interesting because on the movie with Jennifer Lopez that just got released recently, it's interesting what they released recently. Like, I'm always so curious about that. And she was the one that created the AI system that protected our Earth with this big grid around the Earth, our sphere, our dimension, so that no people could come in. Interesting, to defend us. But it was actually the opposite. It was to control us and take us out. I remember them being at the end of bridges. It's so interesting, yeah? So interesting. Like the fillings in our teeth, exactly all of these pieces. So, yeah. Okay. What else did I want to say? I know this has been a long journey, so if you're still here with me, awesome. Thank you. The world updates are always quite long. Okay, so other thing I want to say, yep, so the storms, twin solar system, said all of that. What's interesting too is I'm feeling the collapse of the religious systems coming. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I can feel it, because from a consciousness shift, from being convoluted, and you know, when the education systems start collapsing, given especially now with Terrence, like I said, he's been working on these projects for years, right? But now it's coming into consciousness on a grander scale, very quickly, right? Everyone's gonna like fight up against it, and as it hits the wall, we'll fight up against it, and then it'll be like, here we go. So interesting about these pieces. So what was I going to say about that? Yeah, so this sort of stage of awakening and where that's going to go very quickly, I feel it's going to move pretty rapidly, but I also feel the collapse of the religious systems coming simply because like they've hidden obviously a lot of, you know, like they've hidden sort of the keys to the universe. And I see the religious systems very much like this, like, you know, the people that want to control this system. Ultimately, it's what it is. Don't tell the civilians what's really going on, you know? Okay, so last thing I want to say as well. Oh yeah, just about time. I did share that in a post the other day, a written post around time is very different. Timelines keep jumping. Oh yeah, and the black line. So that's really what I want to say. The black line glitch coming up, I feel, is this sort of hit up against, you know, and it's kind of like everyone's like, what? Questioning everything. And then it'll sort of reset about where we're actually going on this different trajectory and timeline. But also the Simpsons don't predict things. I believe it's the CIA releasing information to give notice about what they're doing, just like Netflix and all the movies giving us, like, you know, having to show us what they're doing to, you know, give permission. It's like a, I don't know, people say it's like a cosmic universal law that you have to have people's permission before you can do stuff. Like, you know, that's kind of like the free will, like, no, you can't do that to me. And basically when there's any sort of, you know, thing, and that's what I've always said, I'm like, it's a bit like the juice. It's kind of like the people who say yes, I've just, you know, you had to give permission, you know what I mean? Like, you had to give permission, and a lot of people were manipulated via their jobs and everything to get that, you know. It's sort of like, well, they still got permission in a manipulative way, right? But the people who just said no straight up and held that, well, you know. And it's the same thing about like the Simpsons and, you know, predicting things. It's like, no, it's the CIA releasing what they're doing so that it gives permission, but it's in a convoluted, manipulative way. And I believe that collapse is coming because it's actually not based on truth. Like, it's actually not a truthful way of getting somebody's permission. It's a manipulative way. And so that sort of in itself is crumbling. And now, given what Terrence Howard has said, it's like, you know, it's sort of, I'm just like, okay, like, let's go, like the boat thing. Let's go. Because that's what's happening. All right, I think I'm done for this. Trust intuition. If you want to understand intuition on this very intricate level and understanding all the pieces of the puzzle and why you get placed in certain situations in your life, what you're learning, what it's helping unravel for your consciousness, healing different wounds, trauma aspects, understanding reality, understanding your life, understanding reality, understanding the world, understanding what your purpose is amongst all of that is in the symbiotic flow of everything. Trust your intuition is the space for you. Comment trust below and I can send you the details, or you can find it on my page and the link in my bio. And I'll be back when the time is right for another world update. Thank you for being here.